Hey guys, tonight I'm going to take you on a journey through a version of the Roman Empire that almost no one ever talks about. A version where the head of the household isn't a general, or a senator, or a bearded man arguing about grain prices in the forum, but a woman, alone, running the entire estate, by herself. You're going to learn the truth about ancient women who lived alone without a man in their lives. Before we begin, take a moment to settle. Dim those lights, switch on a fan for that sweet white background noise, let your shoulders drop away from your ears and make yourself as comfortable as possible. Subscribe to the channel only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and also let me know in the comments where in the world are you listening from tonight, and what hour is it where you are. I always read the first few in the morning, and it's become one of my favourite small rituals. Now, let's begin. Did you know that in ancient Rome there was a whole category of woman so respected that widowers used to brag about marrying one, and that this same woman, if she simply chose not to remarry, could out-earn, out-argue, and out-manage most of the men in her neighbourhood, and the law actually protected her while she did it? Did you know that Roman widows kept the keys to their husband's wine cellar for the rest of their lives, even when the husband had been dead for 40 years? That some of them ran olive presses large enough to supply whole legions? That one particular widow in Pompeii owned so many apartment buildings that her tenants had to line up in the street to pay rent? And did you know that the Latin word for a woman like this, a woman of one husband, who chose herself afterwards, literally became a compliment carved onto tombstones for the next 400 years? Tonight, you are not in your bedroom. Tonight, you're in a 2-story townhouse on a quiet cobbled street in the Roman port town of Ostia, about 15 miles from the capital. The year somewhere around 75 AD. Vespasian is emperor. The Colosseum is still under construction, and everyone is very tired of hearing about it. Your name is Aurelia Secunda. You're 41 years old, which, in the 1st century, is an age most women don't reach, and most men pretend they haven't. Your husband, a respectable olive oil merchant named Marcus, died 11 years ago of something that the local doctor confidently diagnosed as bad air, which was the Roman medical equivalent of a shrug. You have chosen not to remarry. In the language of Rome, this makes you a univira, a woman of one husband. It is a word carved onto tombstones, a word that neighbours use when they want to compliment you, and that other women use when they want to gossip about you, usually both in the same sentence. You own this house. You own the olive press at the edge of town. You own 6 people. You owe nothing to anyone. And tonight, we are going to live a single, very ordinary day inside your very extraordinary life. Let us begin at the beginning. You wake before the light does. There is no alarm clock in Rome. There will not be one for another 18 centuries. What there is instead is a rooster 2 streets over who believes, with a confidence bordering on delusion, that he personally is responsible for the sun rising. He begins his speech about it somewhere around the 4th hour before dawn, and continues until someone either throws a sandal at him or the sun politely obliges. Tonight he has started early. This is fine. You are already half awake. You lie still for a moment in the wooden bed frame, under a woolen blanket dyed a deep, soft red. The mattress beneath you is stuffed with wool and straw, and it has developed, over the 11 years since Marcus died, a shape that is unmistakably yours. A shallow valley down the middle, and 2 gentle slopes on either side where no one lies anymore. You stopped noticing this years ago. Tonight, for some reason, you notice it again, and then you let the thought drift away, the way you let most old thoughts drift away now, softly, without ceremony. The room is dark, but not completely. A single small oil lamp burns on a low shelf near the door. You leave it lit every night, partly out of habit, partly because even a Roman widow who runs her own estate does not particularly enjoy stubbing her toe in the dark on a marble floor. You sit up slowly. The floor is cold. Your feet find the leather sandals waiting neatly beside the bed, exactly where you left them. because you are a woman who has been putting her sandals in the same place every night for 41 years, and you have long since accepted that this is simply who you are. You pad across the room, past the small wooden chest that holds your jewellery, gold earrings, a string of amber beads, a ring that was your mother's, and through the heavy curtain that serves as your bedroom door. Romans do, not, as a rule, believe in interior doors. They believe in curtains, and in the polite fiction that everyone will pretend not to hear what happens on the other side of them. The corridor outside is quiet. You walk past the small shrine tucked into the wall, the lararium, where the little bronze figures of your household gods stand in a neat row, watching everything and judging almost nothing. You pause. You always pause here. You whisper a short greeting to them, the same one your mother whispered, and her mother before her. The gods do not answer. They never do. But you find that you sleep better when you have said good morning to them, and so you say good morning to them, and you move on. Downstairs in the atrium the air is cooler. A shallow rectangular pool sits in the centre of the room, the impluvium, catching rainwater from the opening in the ceiling above. Tonight it is still and black, reflecting nothing but the faintest grey of the sky beginning to lighten. Above, you dip your fingers in. The water is cold. You splash a little on your face. This is your morning wash. It is not luxurious. It is, however, yours. From the back of the house you can already hear the soft, familiar sounds of the household waking. The creak of a wooden shutter, the low murmur of Helena, the housekeeper, saying something to one of the younger servants, the faint clatter of a bronze pot being lifted onto the hearth. You have heard these sounds every morning for 11 years. They are at this point practically a lullaby in reverse, sounds that do not wake you up, but that gently confirm you're already awake, and that the day is beginning without any particular urgency, because no one is waiting for you to do anything except you. You stand for a moment in the atrium, alone, in a house that is yours, in a life that is yours, and you breathe in slowly. The air smells of cool stone, faint wood smoke, and somewhere, very faintly, bread. This is how you begin, every day, softly, on your own time, with the sandals you chose in the house you chose at an hour that belongs entirely to you. Breakfast for most Romans is not really breakfast. It is a small, almost apologetic event, something to be gotten out of the way so the real business of the day can begin. The Romans call it ientaculum, and it is, at its most elaborate, a piece of bread with perhaps a little honey, a few olives, a cup of watered wine, and, on a particularly ambitious morning, a slice of cheese. This is not a people who believe in brunch. You walk into the small room off the atrium where the household takes its morning meal. There is no table here, not really. Just a low wooden stool and a shallow bowl waiting for you on a sideboard. Helena has already laid it out. A round of bread, still warm. A dish of olives in their own oil. A wedge of pale sheep's cheese. A small jug of posca, the vinegary watered wine that every sensible Roman drinks in the morning, because the alternative is drinking the local water, and the local water, you have long since decided, is a form of slow-motion suicide. You sit. You tear off a piece of the bread. It is dense, chewy, faintly sour with a crust the colour of old parchment. You dip it into the olive oil, your own oil, from your own press, pressed last autumn from olives grown on the small piece of land outside the town that your husband's family has owned for 3 generations, and that now belongs entirely to you. You eat slowly. There is no one to hurry you. There has not been anyone to hurry you for 11 years. Helena drifts in quietly and stands by the doorway, waiting to be noticed. She's perhaps 60. She's been in this household since before you were married, and she has, over the decades, developed the particular kind of patience that only people who have raised other people's children ever truly develop. When she was younger, she was a slave. Marcus freed her in his will. She chose, afterwards, to stay. You pay her a small wage now, and she pretends every year around Saturnalia to be surprised when you give her a little extra. Domina, she says softly. It is a title. It means mistress of the house. It is not a name. No one in this household calls you by your name anymore, and you have grown so used to this that the sound of your own name, on the rare occasions it is spoken aloud, now startles you slightly, the way one might be startled by an old friend turning up unannounced. Yes, Helena. The steward from the olive press is waiting in the vestibule. He says it is not urgent. You pause mid-chew. The steward from the olive press has, in your considered experience, never once said something was urgent. He has, however, also never once said something was not urgent about a matter that was not, in fact, urgent. The distinction is subtle. You have learned, over 11 years, to read it carefully. You nod. I'll see him when I've finished. Helena dips her head and slips away. You finish your bread. You finish your olives. You drink your posca. You wipe your fingers on a small linen cloth, and you stand. Before you leave the room, you glance, as you always do, at the small wooden shelf on the far wall. On it sits a clay portrait bust, a modest one, not the kind of extravagant marble thing the senators keep in their atria, of Marcus. He is depicted as he looked at about 35, which was, even you will admit, his best decade. His nose is slightly too large. His hair is depicted as fuller than it actually was. The sculptor, who was paid in olive oil, was being generous. You give the bust a small, almost imperceptible nod. You do not speak to it. You used to, in the early years. You don't anymore. Not because you have forgotten him, you have not, but because you have, slowly, over a long time, moved into a room in yourself where he no longer needs to be the one you check in with before making decisions. He would, you think, approve of this, or at least the better parts of him would. You step out of the breakfast room smoothing the folds of your stola, the long ankle-length tunic that every respectable Roman woman wears, and you walk toward the vestibule to meet your steward. The day, as the Romans would say, has officially begun. Whether the steward's news is urgent or not, you will find out in precisely the same way you find out everything else now, calmly, alone, and on your own terms. The vestibule is the narrow entrance hall between the front door and the atrium, and it is, on most mornings, the closest thing your house has to a waiting room. Today, it contains exactly one man. His name is Gaius. He is the steward of your olive press, the freedman your husband trained up in the last years of his life, and the man who has, since Marcus died, quietly run the operational side of the business while you have run the strategic side. He is tall, lean, and permanently sunburnt across the tops of his cheekbones, because olive presses are not, as a rule, located indoors. He bows his head slightly as you enter. Domina. Gaius. What is it? He hesitates. This is how you know it is, in fact, somewhat urgent, although he will never say so. You have come to appreciate over the years that the more slowly Gaius begins a sentence, the more expensive the sentence is eventually going to be. The shipment to the military camp at Messinum, he begins carefully. The one that was due to leave at the end of the month. Yes. The centurion's quartermaster has written asking whether we can double it. You consider this. Doubling a shipment of olive oil to a military outpost is the kind of thing that, in the hands of a less experienced businesswoman, might produce a flutter of panic. In your hands, it produces something much more useful. Arithmetic. You think for a moment about how much oil is currently sitting in the storage amphorae at the press, about how much the remaining harvest from your own groves could reasonably yield, about how much additional oil you might buy, discreetly and at a reasonable price, from the smaller grower up the coast who has been wanting to do business with you for 2 years, and who has, as you happen to know, a slightly better crop this year than he will admit to anyone. You nod slowly. We can double it, but not at the same price per amphora. Gaius almost smiles. No, Domina. 10% increase, framed as a favour, not a price rise. Remind him that we cleared last month's shipment 3 days early, and that not every supplier on this coast can say the same. 10%, he repeats. committing it to the extraordinary memory that is the reason you have kept him for 11 years, framed as a favour. And tell Quintus up the coast that I will visit his press next week, not to buy, just to visit. This time Gaius does smile. He understands, as you do, that telling Quintus you are coming to his press not to buy is the single most effective way of ensuring that Quintus will, by the time you arrive, be absolutely desperate to sell. He bows and leaves. You stand alone for a moment in the vestibule, listening to his footsteps fade down the cobbled street outside. The door is still slightly ajar, and through it you can see a narrow strip of Ostia. Waking up, a baker's boy carrying a tray of small round loaves on his head. A woman in a saffron-dyed pallor hurrying past with a basket. 2 dogs having a slow, unhurried disagreement about the contents of a puddle. The air smells of bread and of the sea, and very faintly of the olive oil that seems by now to have soaked into the walls of your entire life. You close the door gently. If you've made it this far without falling asleep, first of all, well done, and second of all, if you're enjoying this quiet walk through someone else's day, a small tap on the like button helps other tired people find the channel in the evening when they need something soft to fall asleep to. Only if you want to. Your sleep is still the most important thing happening in this room. You walk back through the atrium, past the impluvium, the water in it catching a little more light now, pale grey and faintly rippling, and into the small room at the back of the house that Marcus used to call his tablinum. This is where the business of the household is done. It is a modest room, a small wooden desk, a stool, a shelf of wax tablets and rolled papyrus scrolls, an abacus, and an inkwell made of black stone that sits heavy and cool to the touch. You sit. You pull a wax tablet toward you. You pick up a bronze stylus, the sharp end for writing, the flat end for smoothing out mistakes, because even 2,000 years ago, it was understood that mistakes are simply a part of the process. You begin to work through the accounts for the month, columns of numbers, names of customers, quantities of oil, prices per amphora in sesterti and denarii. A small column at the far right for the tips paid to the dock workers in Misenum, because you have learned that a dock worker who's been tipped generously last month is a dock worker who handles your amphorae a great deal more gently this month. You work quietly, alone, in a room that is yours. Outside, the sounds of Ostia grow slowly. Louder, a cart rumbling past, a vendor calling out the price of fish, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer setting up for the day, and you do not notice any of it, because the numbers in front of you are, for this hour at least, the entire shape of your world. By the time the sun has climbed high enough to throw a warm, narrow column of light through the opening in the atrium roof, the first half of your working day is done. The accounts are balanced. A letter has been dictated to a scribe and sealed with your husband's old signet ring, the one you still wear on a chain around your neck, not on your finger, because it was never meant for your finger. 3 separate household matters have been settled, quietly, without raising your voice, because you long ago discovered that raising your voice is a thing one only needs to do when one's authority is uncertain. And your authority these days is not uncertain at all. The sun, here in the atrium, is the closest thing Rome has to a clock. It tells you by the angle at which it falls across the floor tiles that it is now the 5th hour of daylight, roughly 11 in the morning, by a reckoning that has not yet been invented. Time in your world is measured in shadows. It is, by tradition, the hour for the prandium, a light midday meal, usually taken standing, and usually consisting of whatever the household happens to have. You walk into the small inner courtyard, the peristyle, where a square of sky opens above a little garden of herbs and a single old fig tree that Marcus planted the year you were married, and that has, in the 22 years since, produced exactly 4 edible figs and an enormous quantity of shade. A low wooden table has been set up beneath the fig tree. On it, a plate of cold chicken from last night, a bowl of soft white cheese, a small dish of boiled eggs, a loaf of bread, and a jug of watered wine. The wine is cooler than it was this morning because Helena has, as always, lowered the jug into the impluvium for a quarter of an hour to take the edge off. This is what passes in first-century Rome for refrigeration. You eat standing up, slowly, in the shade of your own fig tree. Halfway through the meal, a soft knock sounds at the outer door. Helena goes to answer. A moment later, she reappears in the peristyle with a small, pleased expression. "Domina, Cornelia is here." You smile for the first time this morning. Cornelia is your closest friend. She's the widow of a wine merchant, and she is, like you, a univira. She runs her late husband's vineyards in the hills outside the town, and she is, depending on whom you ask, either the most sensible businesswoman on this coast or the most terrifying dinner guest in Ostia. You are personally of the opinion that she is both, and that the second is what makes the first work. She comes through the doorway in a pale blue pallor, her greying hair pinned up in the simple, practical style that widows of a certain age have long since agreed looks better than the elaborate constructions of their younger years. She carries a small woven basket in one hand. She sets it on the table and raises one eyebrow at your plate. "You're eating alone again." "I am now eating with you." "I brought grapes," she says by way of greeting, and sits down on the stone bench beside the fig tree with the slow, deliberate care of someone who has privately decided that her knees are no longer what they used to be, but who refuses to be rushed about it by anyone, including her own knees. You spend the next hour together in the green shade of the peristyle, talking about nothing in particular and everything that matters. The price of wine, the health of a mutual friend who has taken a fall, a rumour about a new building being planned near the Forum, the quality of this year's grape harvest, which Cornelia pronounces with grave satisfaction, insulting. You ask what she means. She explains that the grapes are so good this year that the weather is clearly mocking her, because she spent 6 months last winter rebuilding the drainage terraces, and now the terraces were apparently unnecessary. She delivers this complaint as though it is a personal betrayal by the Italian sky itself. You laugh. You do not laugh often. You laugh more often around Cornelia than around anyone else. You suspect this is a thing she has noticed and has quietly decided not to mention, which is, in your experience, one of the truest tests of friendship. Eventually she rises, slowly, brushing crumbs from the front of her pallor. She picks up the empty basket. She squeezes your hand once, briefly, in a gesture that is not theatrical but is, somehow, more than it looks. And she says, the way she always says at the end of every visit, "Don't be a stranger to yourself, Aurelia." You nod. You do not reply. You never reply to this. You both understand what it means. She leaves. You stand for a moment alone in the peristyle, under the fig tree that Marcus planted in the house that is yours, in the middle of a quiet Roman afternoon, and you breathe out slowly. In the middle of the afternoon, when the light in the atrium has turned the colour of the warm honey, a visitor arrives whom you did not invite. His name is Lucius Vibius. He is a distant cousin of Marcus. He is, by Roman convention, the closest surviving male relative of your late husband on his father's side, and he is therefore, in his own private estimation, the man who should, by rights, have inherited the olive press, the groves, the house, and the modest but respectable fortune that came with all of them, 11 years ago, when Marcus died. This did not happen. Marcus left everything to you. You have borne him 3 children, 2 of whom survived, which means that, under the ius liberorum, the law of 3 children, you are, legally, a fully independent woman. You do not need a guardian. You do not need a male relative's permission to buy, or sell or lend or give. You are sui juris, of your own right. Lucius finds this inconvenient. He visits, on average, once every 4 months. The visits always begin with a very warm embrace, which you tolerate the way one tolerates a cat that insists on sitting on the scroll you're trying to read. The visits always proceed through a series of polite inquiries after your health, the children's health, the weather, the news from the Forum, and the general state of the provinces. And the visits always, inevitably, arrive at the real reason for the visit, which is an idea gently floated that perhaps it is time for you to consider whether it might be more proper, more fitting, more respectable, more Roman, for a woman of your age and dignity to step back from the direct management of a business and to allow a younger male relative, perhaps for instance him, to assume the daily burden. He never uses the word burden. He uses the word honour. You have learned, over 11 years, to hear the one underneath the other. Today he sits in your atrium on the wooden bench opposite the impluvium, a cup of your wine in his hand, his toga arranged with the slightly over-careful precision of a man who has practiced it in a mirror. He is, you realise with something close to tenderness, nervous. He is always a little nervous around you now. He was not nervous around you years ago, when Marcus was alive. That he is nervous around you now is, you have come to understand, one of the small private victories of a widow's life, and you allow yourself to enjoy it for a moment before answering him. He finishes his careful little speech. It ends, as it always ends, with the phrase, "It is only of course what Marcus would have wanted." You take a slow sip of your wine. You set the cup down. "Lucius," you say, and your voice is perfectly level, perfectly friendly, and perfectly final. "Marcus wrote his will himself. He read it aloud to me, and he signed it in front of 3 witnesses. If he had wanted the business to go to you, he would have written your name on it. He did not." Lucius opens his mouth. "And," you add gently before he can speak, "I have borne 3 children, 2 of whom are alive. You know what that means. You know the law." There is a long pause. In the pause you hear, very faintly, the sound of Helena in the next room, pretending extremely hard not to be listening. Helena has been pretending not to listen to these conversations for 11 years, and has, in that time, become genuinely excellent at it. Lucius exhales. He tries, one more time, a softer angle. Some vague sentence about family, about legacy, about the good name of the Vibii. You let him finish. You do not interrupt. When he is done, you smile at him, the way one smiles at a child who is asked for the 3rd time in one day whether he can have the honey cake that has already been declined twice. "It is always good to see you, Lucius," you say. "Please give my regards to your wife." He stands, he bows, he leaves. When the outer door closes, you sit for a moment in the atrium by yourself, listening to the water in the impluvium move gently in the afternoon light. You feel distinctly not victorious. You feel simply steady, the way one feels after carrying something heavy across a courtyard and setting it down in exactly the place where it was supposed to go. There is no triumph in it. There is only the quiet satisfaction of a thing done correctly. You drain the last of your wine. You stand. You have work to return to. The light in the atrium thickens and slows. The square of sky above the impluvium turns from warm honey to the deep, soft gold of late afternoon, and then, gradually, almost without your noticing, into the pale lavender of early evening. The shadows in the corners of the house lengthen. The stones cool. This is the hour the Romans call the cena, the main meal of the day, the one around which everything else is arranged. For the wealthy it is an event. 3 courses, reclining couches, guests, slaves, music. The slow ceremony of pretending that one is not in fact hungry. For you, most evenings, it is something quieter. A single dish, a little bread, a cup of wine, a long slow sitting down in a room that has grown gentle with the day's last light. Tonight is one of the quieter evenings. Helena has set a low table in the small dining room off the peristyle. On it, a shallow earthenware bowl of a thick barley and vegetable stew, flavoured with leeks and a small amount of cured pork, the whole thing finished with a drizzle of your own green gold olive oil, a piece of dark bread, torn, not sliced, a small dish of honey, a cup of wine, warmer now, undiluted a little more than the morning's cup, because at this hour the day's business is finished and the wine no longer needs to keep you sharp. You sit on the low couch. you do not recline in. The grand dining room manner because there is no one here to see you recline, and you have, over the years, developed the slightly unfashionable habit of simply sitting up properly when you eat alone, which is, you suspect, something your grandmother would approve of. You eat slowly. The barley is soft. The leeks have dissolved almost into the broth. The olive oil, poured on at the last moment, rises across the surface of the stew in small bright pools, and tastes faintly of the grove outside town, and of the autumn when it was pressed, and of the quiet, enormous fact that you grew and pressed and owned and served this oil every step of the way, yourself. After the meal, Helena takes the bowl away. You move through the house slowly, performing the small familiar tasks that close a Roman day. You check that the outer door is barred. You check that the shutters on the ground floor windows are fastened. You walk past the lararium again and nod to the little bronze gods. Good. Evening, this time, instead of good morning, and you climb the narrow wooden stairs to the upper floor, where your bedroom sits at the end of the short corridor. On the small table beside your bed, a single new oil lamp has been lit. Its flame is small and steady, and it throws a soft, round pool of golden light across the painted wall, where a faint fresco of a garden, olive trees, birds, a little fountain, has been fading gently for 20 years. You sit on the edge of the bed. You unpin your hair, a long, slow process because Roman hairpins are many and your hair is thick, and you let it fall loose over your shoulders. You change from your stola into a lighter, plainer tunic, the one you sleep in. You wash your face in a shallow basin of water that Helena has left beside the bed, and you pat it dry with a linen cloth that smells faintly of lavender, because one of the servants has tucked a small bundle of dried lavender into the linen chest, and you have chosen, over many years, not to comment on this small kindness, because commenting on it would, you feel, slightly diminish it. You sit back on the bed. The house is quiet. The street outside is quiet. The evening is quiet. Somewhere far away, over the rooftops of Ostia, a dog is barking in a distant, unhurried way, and somewhere closer, in the peristyle garden below, the last cricket of the day is beginning its long, patient evening song. You do not rush this moment. You have learned, over 11 years, that the very last quarter of an hour before you lie down is, in its own quiet way, one of the most important quarters of an hour a human being has. It is the hour when the day, whatever it was, busy, difficult, tender, strange, is gently folded up and placed on a shelf in yourself, to be looked at tomorrow only if tomorrow needs it, and otherwise to be left entirely alone. You breathe in slowly, you breathe out slower. And in this small, gold-lit room, in this quiet house, in this ordinary and extraordinary life, you are for this moment completely at rest. You lie down. The wool blanket is heavy across you, and warm, and familiar, and it settles over your shoulders with the particular gentleness of a blanket that has been yours for so long that it has, in its own quiet way, learned the shape of your sleeping body, the way a well-worn path through a garden learns the shape of the feet that walk it every evening. The oil lamp on the small table beside the bed has been lowered now, its wick trimmed, its flame small and steady and orange, casting soft, slow shadows across the painted wall, where the little frescoed garden seems, in this dim light, almost to move. The painted olive trees drifting gently, the painted birds caught mid-flight, the painted fountain silent and still. You hear, faintly, the very last sounds of the house settling for the night. A wooden shutter being drawn, closed somewhere below. Helena's slow footsteps in the corridor heading toward her own room at the far end of the house. The soft scrape of the cat, nameless but long tolerated, finding its usual place on a stone bench in the peristyle. A single gentle creak from the timber of the upper floor as the day's warmth slowly leaves the wood. Beyond the walls of the house, Ostia is quieting too. The carts that rumbled through the streets this morning have gone home. The vendors who called out their prices at midday have packed away their stalls. Somewhere down at the docks, a watchman is making his slow round, his lantern a small yellow point moving along the waterfront, and somewhere far out at sea, a ship is making its way into the harbour under a sky that is slowly filling, star by star, with the patient, cold, eternal lights that the Romans have been charting for centuries without ever quite finishing the map. You close your eyes. Behind your closed eyes, the day replays itself only in the gentlest way. The first grey light in the atrium, the warmth of the bread, Cornelia's hand squeezing yours briefly beneath the fig tree, the cool weight of the wine cup, the steady sound of your own voice saying what needed to be said, and then, the way all days eventually do, even the long ones, even the difficult ones, even the quietly triumphant ones, it begins, softly, to fade. You think, for one brief moment, of the women like you across the length and breadth of this empire tonight. The widow in Hispania who runs her vineyards alone, the freed woman in Egypt who owns 3 shops, the quiet matron in Gaul who has for 30 years managed her estate with no husband, no brother, no guardian, and no apology. You will never meet any of them. You do not need to. You know that they are there. And they, in their own houses, in their own beds, on this same night, under this same sky, know, in some deep and unspoken way, that you are there too. The lamp flickers, the flame grows smaller, the room grows softer still. You do not hear the lamp go out. You're already beginning very gently to drift, first into the kind of half-sleep where the edges of the room grow soft and the sound of the cricket in the peristyle below becomes something almost like a lullaby, and then, by degrees so small that no one, not even you, could tell you the moment it happened, into the long, deep, honest sleep of a woman who needs no man at all. Beyond your window, the stars turn slowly above Ostia, and, in a house that is yours, in a life that is yours, in a night that asks nothing of you at all, you rest, and there we leave her. Aurelia Secunda, in her small, gold-lit bedroom, on a quiet street in a port town, in a corner of an empire that mostly forgot to write her story down, and yet somehow in 1,000 tombstones and 1,000 scraps of papyrus and 1,000 tiny legal records, left the shape of her anyway, for us to find 2,000 years later on a very different kind of night. If you are still awake, let yourself be a little heavier now. Let your shoulders soften one more time. Let your breathing slow a little further. The day, whatever it was, is behind you. The night, whatever it brings, will find you ready. And if, somewhere in the course of this long, quiet hour, this story helped you begin to drift, you might tomorrow, when you wake, consider sharing it with someone you know who struggles a little to sleep, not as a favour to me, as a small, quiet kindness to them. That is, I think, the best use these stories can be put to. Sleep well tonight. I'll be here tomorrow.